scrambling for traction. You get into that power and just hold your foot down. Welcome back, I'm Tedward, and today we have a unique opportunity to compare the 2022 Honda Civic Si to the 2023 Acura Integra A-Spec with technology package. And I like that this is the trim level we're comparing because this top trim Integra is the only version of the car that comes as a manual 6-speed, despite the fact that the Honda Civic Si only comes in a manual 6-speed. So for some of you, the decision may have already been made very clear that the Integra is not the right car for you because of the price. This one costs about $37,000, where the Honda Civic Si comes in just around $28,000. I know that dealer markups are a thing, but today I would like to take a very close look at the interiors and differences of these two cars and then take the Integra out for a drive to show how it operates in comparison to my Civic Si. So first, let's talk about what's the same, then we'll talk about what's different. They both have the same 1.5 liter turbocharged direct injection 4-cylinder. They both have a limited slip differential and the same 6-speed manual gearbox. The layout of the interiors are essentially identical, but there are more features on the Integra. Although the Integra comes as a hatchback, the Si only comes in sedan trim, and that probably makes room for the Type R to be the fast hatchback that's going to come out for the Honda lineup. But other than luxury features, the most important difference between this trim level of Acura Integra and that Honda Civic is that this Integra has adaptive dampers. Yes, there are changes in the modes to the adaptive dampers, which means they can become softer and firmer as you like, making it a more luxurious car in comfort mode and a more sporty car in sport mode. Whereas in the Civic, you are stuck in Civic mode the entire time. There is only one trim level of the Honda Civic Si. Yes, you can choose which color and which tires you end up with on the car, but you get what you get and you don't get upset. So you get these cloth seats, which I think a lot of folks were a little nervous about because they don't have a lumbar support adjustment like the Integra does. However, these are very supportive and the cloth actually breathes pretty well. Whereas this Integra has leather and micro suede in the seats, and we've got 12-way adjustments, which gives you the ability to change your lumbar support. The only issue that I have with these seats is that they retain a lot of heat. So on a hot day like today, it's 95 degrees outside here in New England. When you get in the car, these are not cooled seats. They are heated seats, but they are not cooled seats. So when you sit that back up against there, if you're already hot and these seats are already hot from baking in the sun, they are not going to cool off very quickly. In the back seat of the Civic, a lot of folks complained that the design language, the red interior, was not carried over to the back. It looks like it's the two different cars because in the front, you've got red on the doors. Back here, nothing. But on the Acura, it is carried over all the way back. So you do get nice leather on these door sills and the rear seats. Plenty of leather back here, but no micro suede, just a granola bar. And when we sit back here, it is essentially the same. We've got our 60/40 split rear folding seats, and we've got our droopy rear armrest with cup holders and charge ports here. My biggest issue with the back seat of this car is that in Canada, the Honda Civic Si came with heated rear seats. This Acura Integra does not have rear heated seats. It has front heated seats, but not rear heated seats. And although that's not a big deal for me, considering I'm never going to be back here, I think that if you're spending $37,000 on this car, the technology that exists in the Canadian Si for much cheaper should exist in the Integra. This shifter looks the same as the Civic. It's not. It's actually got a flat top here, and that one has a round top. Both, however, are exceedingly hot, and you will basically brand yourself with an H pattern logo on your palm if you touch it in hot weather. Down here, you'll notice you get a individual mode. You don't get an individual button on that one. And of course, you do get wireless charging on the interior of the Acura, and you have to plug in to the Civic. However, both do come with wireless Apple CarPlay. I'm certain this won't be a deal breaker, but you have sunglasses storage in the Acura. You do not in the Civic. On this trim level of Integra, we get the ELS Studio 3D 16 speaker sound system, which does sound pretty phenomenal. The Bose system in this Civic Si is actually pretty good, and I'm very thankful that Honda gave it to the Civic Si because they have not given the Bose system to cars like the HR-V in any trim. And I'll say there's a noticeable difference between the non-Bose system, the base Honda sound system, and the Bose system. So this to that, yes, the ELS is better. However, it's not so significant that I think it would sway you for $10,000. But what may sway you is this digital dashboard, which you can get on high trim Civics, but not the Si. In the Si, you do have some analog gauges going on, one analog gauge going on here, but in this car, you do actually get a proper LCD display. And more importantly than the display, you actually get a temperature gauge, a water temperature gauge, which you do not get on the Si. You actually just have to hope and pray that it beeps at you if it overheats. The design language of the two cars are very similar. However, the Acura is a bit more bold. You've got Integra written on the front and rear bumpers. You've got a palm-sized emblem up front, whereas on the Honda, just a little bit smaller. Being the upscale model, the Acura does come with fog lights, and you actually get this little functional vent here through the bumper, which does not come on the Si. Now, the Acura design language is very accurate. It comes to a point in the front, just like the NSX. If we go to the rear of the car, you'll notice that the rear bumper doesn't actually come to a point like the NSX does. However, this does. This little lip spoiler comes to a point which carries that over. And then from the rear, I actually think this is a very handsome car. Notice also you get parking sensors front and rear on the Integra. You don't get that on the Si. And then this feature right here, this little bit of design language, very RSX. That's a great way to harken back to the history of the Integra. And then back here, our hatchback is massive. We have so much storage space back here, which isn't to say that the Civic Si doesn't have lots of storage space, but the versatility of a hatchback is something that we always adore. And back here, you've got this big subwoofer for the ELS Studio 3D sound system. Under the hood, unsurprisingly, this is the same as the Civic under here. That's getting hot. And you'll notice that even though it is the premium version of the Civic Si, being the Acura monikered car, it does not have hood struts, so you do still need to use the prop. And just for the sake of comparison, we'll open up the Civic as well. And so far, the only real differences I see in the engine bay are that the Acura battery gets a little coat. We've got an Acura badge here on the valve cover. And this motor mount seems to have a slight difference in comparison to the motor mount on the Si. But other than that, they look pretty much identical under here. For most people, I feel like the decision between these two cars really gets made in the luxuries. If you absolutely need the heated seats or the power seats, or you want the adjustable dampers, well, the Integra is the obvious choice. But there are actually differences in the way they drive despite being almost identical. So let's go take a ride in the Integra and see how it stacks up against its cheaper in-house rival. So let's get it started up. I love the digital dash. It's very crisp, it's clear, it's easy to read. And then we've got our touchscreen here, very accessible, and it's exactly the same other than some slight differences in the skin compared to the Honda Civic Si. So if we go home, you'll notice these are slightly different colors, but essentially we have all the same functionality that we have in the Si. The steering wheel, a little bit different because we are moving through different things in this screen. So not a huge difference, but they are not identical. Some other very small things. This has auto wipers, so it does have rain sensing wipers. You can just leave that down one notch and the wipers will come on as needed. And of course, because this has fog lights, you do have a fog light switch on that stock as well. But the nuances don't end there. When we put it into reverse, our passenger side mirror goes down. That does not happen on the Civic Si, and at least I haven't figured out how to make it do that, so that seems unique. And then you can see our heads-up display in the glass. You'll also notice a little car in that display, and it shows the brake lights on or off. It shows the directionals on each side, but we are in reverse. It actually doesn't show the reverse lights. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing where it shows just about everything, but it does not show that the car is in reverse. But we can make that car go away if we turn off the cruise control, and then we're left with just that dashboard. If you want to put it back, there it is. All right. in reverse, I found that this car actually has better rearward visibility as a hatchback than it does as a sedan. But of course, we still have the same camera, does the job. Now that's been done in comfort mode. So we're currently in the softest setting where we have, a little bit more compliance from these adaptive dampers, which is great. It's actually noticeably softer than the SI. So if you do want that bit of luxury out of this style of car, that might alone be worth that money, because the SI, while not stiff, definitely is a little more jarring over some of the bumps. Now, this is not a Rolls Royce, so don't expect that you're getting something that's going to completely smooth out everything, but it definitely has a slightly more luxurious feeling to it. But we can go into normal mode, and that's going to change that throttle response a little bit, firm up those dampers just a touch, and then sport mode obviously heightens it all just a bit more. Auto rev matching, just the same as it is in the SI, does a great job. And what do we have here? That looks fun. Very cool. All right. I love the limited slip differential in this car. It helps you get off the line quickly. The low-end torque is reasonable in this car, but until it spools up just a little bit, you got nothing. So there's a bit of danger factor. Like if you're gonna launch this car into traffic and you have a really tight gap, just get those revs up and slip that clutch, because the first 1,000 RPM, not a whole lot is going to happen. All right, let's go into comfort mode over the railroad tracks. Pretty nice, no rattles in the cabin. I do feel like it just feels slightly more substantial than the Civic Si. There's something about it that has a little more of a complete feeling. It feels a little less tinny, and part of that, I believe, comes down to the fact that it's probably better insulated. It's certainly quieter in this cabin, not by a huge margin, but by a noticeable margin. And that's what I mean when you've got to be kind of a sommelier of these cars. Like, you need to be able to taste the little changes, the slight notes that are different in them, because I really think if you drove this car in complete isolation to the SI, you wouldn't notice that it's particularly great in some of those areas. But against the SI, you notice that there are definitely upgrades in the Integra. At low speeds in normal mode, this steering is a bit heavier than the SI. The SI steering actually gets very, very light, and this still gets light. It's not a massive difference, but very, very mildly different tune. Into sport mode. Yeah, maybe it still has the same rev hang. It is really difficult to tell if that's lessened in this car. If it is, it's not by much. And then a slightly different blinker sound. Not by much either, but just enough. It's the premium Acura blinker. So still not fast. It's not a fast car, but it has enough power and torque to do its thing, get out of its own way. You just got to plan a little bit, because we're talking about a 7-second to 60 car. Out here on the highway, we'll go back into comfort mode, soften up those dampers, and this is where the car starts to feel a little more premium. It is easy to forget that you are driving something other than the Honda Civic Si, because everything looks basically the same, except for the fact that it's a bit quieter. And that makes a lot of difference. If you're on the highway a lot like I am, a quieter cabin is a nicer place to be. So let's go put it in a corner and see how it handles, because this 11th gen chassis is just so awesome. Look at that. I mean, you can really just chuck it in. I mean, I know that the cooling system in this 1.5 liter turbo is maybe not like totally suited for legitimate track use, but these supportive seats and this chassis, the way it just can find its way around a corner so nicely, is really special. And it lets you play with that rear end just a little bit too, which I find to be just so charming. Scrambling for traction, you can get into that power and just hold your foot down. We're going to lift a little bit as this tightens up, but it allows you to get into it because this differential puts that power to the outside and it helps pull you around. It's just unbelievable. It's just so entertaining. It never gets old. And that's the thing is, I think on paper, you can look at this car against some of its competitors, and you might be able to, we're going to cool it down a little bit, you might be able to say, well, it doesn't have the power of maybe like a Mercedes or a BMW that it's kind of competing with in those entry-level classes. But what this does is really bring out the joy of driving. Like if you're a driver, this car will be entertaining to you. For example, some of the most hardcore drivers, the best drivers I know, they're out at like legitimate track clubs doing either wheel-to-wheel racing or really impressive time attack stuff in Miatas that they've built themselves, because not everybody is out there with supreme wealth driving 600 LTs and outrageous supercars that they can go out and really run. But what you see is people making the absolute most of the cars they can afford and the cars that are well balanced. And this car, as a proper luxury front wheel drive thing, my goodness, is it amazing. Do I wish it had like 275 horsepower? Of course. It would be super nice if this had more power, if it revved super high. But what I think is really entertaining about it is that it gives you this epic confidence to attack an on-ramp or an off-ramp behind a Porsche 911 or behind someone who thinks they're a hotshot. You know, I've got like a GT350 behind me right now. Somebody who's got something that they think is fast, but if you're the better driver, you'll actually be able to keep up in this car in a corner. And that, to me, is the essence of a driver's car. That's some beautiful stuff. With gas prices as they are right now, I think part of the appeal of this Integra really lies within those folks who maybe had like an Infiniti Q50 or a G37 or something where, sure, they had all the luxury amenities of that car, but they're getting like 21, 22 miles per gallon if they're lucky. And with this, you're able to have most of those luxuries, maybe not in as substantial of a vehicle, but you can milk out like 36 to 40 miles per gallon without really trying that hard. As the sun starts to set, our auto dimming mirror is going to do some work for us as headlights start coming up behind us. That is another feature that you do not get in the Honda Civic Si. And the way I look at this car is, do you remember in the maybe you're too young for this, but in the 90s, in the mid 90s, you could still order a Toyota Camry, like a base Toyota Camry 4-cylinder with roll down windows and manual locks. I'm talking manual locks, no button to lock and unlock every door. You had to reach across and lock every door if you wanted security when you left your car. And you had to use a key, no key fob, to open and close those doors. Or you could order a V6 loaded Camry with a sunroof, with power windows, power locks, security system, all of the goodies. And the car felt so much more substantial, so much more significant, and so much more luxurious than the base. The way I look at it is, the SI is certainly not in the realm of being a base Camry from 1995, but it does feel a little lighter. It feels a little bit cheaper. It doesn't have all of the luxury features that this has, but in essence, it's the same. And this gives you that vibe of the luxury version of the Camry, whereas the SI is the simple man's car. It's there because you get the sheer driving pleasure of a great chassis, the same engine, and a well-tuned suspension, whereas this gives you options. This gives you a little bit of a better sound system. It gives you the wireless charging. You get some luxury features, and you get a heads-up display. Those are things that I think are a little more expected in 2022. But for the fact that the SI, you can get that sort of stripper model of this for under $30,000 is really incredible. And if you want the top trim of this Integra, you're still under $40,000 before dealer markups. And hopefully you shop around and find one at MSRP. But, you know, Heated seats are a nice feature, and I think some of the things, those types of features, can sell this car in a heartbeat, right? Those are some of those things where it doesn't matter what else the car has. You might not buy the SI because it just doesn't have the heated seats. You don't want to do a winter without heated seats. You want the heads-up display. You want the auto-dimming mirror. You want the wireless charging. There are things like that that I understand are just deal breakers for some folks to go with the lower trim version on the Honda side. But I gotta say, this thing is a joy to drive. There's a reason I bought a Honda Civic Si, and there's a reason why people like them. This is a great little car. It's not going to wow you with power, but it is going to give you all the features for, like I said, under 40 grand. I know it still feels like a lot, but it's a good car and it's going to serve you well in the future. So thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. I hope this helps kind of understand the differences in the features and what's available between the Civic Si and the Acura Integra. This is the top trim version. I don't necessarily want to drive any of the lower trim versions because I don't really care about the CVT. I'm not a CVT guy. I'll drive it if I have to, if it's just for, showing you guys what it is. But I think this is really the comparo between the Si and the Integra. I don't think I can genuinely compare a CVT against the Si because the Si is just going to win no matter what the Acura has in store. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one. Kind of fun how that tachometer blinks red at you as you get near red line. Very fun, a little shift light. Check out the aero package on this Scion IM. That can't be helping things very much. That is a proper parachute.